Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the summit. I'm your co-host, Dr. Mike Sapiro, and I'm here with Dr. Andrew Weil and Amita Nathwani. Dr. Andrew Weil is the founder of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, founder and chairman of the Weil Foundation, and founder and co-founder of True Food Kitchen franchise. He is the University of Arizona's Lovell Jones Endowed Chair in Integrative Medicine, a clinical professor of medicine and professor of public health. He is an internationally recognized expert for his views on healthy living and his critique of the future of medicine and healthcare. A prolific writer, he is the author of several books, including Fast Food, Good Food, and Mind Over Meds. Amita Nathwani is a leading expert in Ayurveda medicine and integrative health, specializing in the balance of mind, body, and spirit for optimal well-being. Her approach combines ancient wisdom with modern practices, focusing on personalized care to address the unique needs of each individual. With her deep understanding of both Eastern and Western healing systems, Amita empowers others to achieve physical health and holistic wellness, making her an inspiring voice for transformation and vitality. In addition to working with individuals, she teaches healthcare providers to empower their patients to achieve physical health and holistic wellness as well. Well, both of you, thank you so much for coming on our summit. I'm very excited to chat with you today.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. I'm actually an Ayurvedic practitioner myself, and I'm so excited that we're bringing this into Western medicine. And I'm very curious how you both see Ayurveda integrating into the Western medical system. So, Dr. Weil, I know you've been an advocate for many long years of integrative approaches to healthcare. How do you see Ayurveda fitting into the Western medical system?
Well, I think Ayurveda has many things to offer conventional medicine and integrative medicine, but I think the integration of it has been quite slow, certainly compared to traditional Chinese medicine, which has made great inroads into Western culture and into integrative medicine. I think some of that is that there have not been many Ayurvedic practitioners available for doctors to refer to. I think most conventional doctors are very uninformed about Ayurvedic medicine. Some of the principles of Ayurvedic medicine, I think, seem strange to Westerners and maybe are too difficult to incorporate. And others, I think, make a great deal of sense. My experience is that Ayurvedic medicine has a very strong emphasis on lifestyle. And I think it is quite effective at dealing with some of the diseases that are very prevalent in our culture that have lifestyle roots, things like cardiovascular disease, asthma, allergic conditions. I've seen Ayurveda be very effective for that.
Could you just give us a basic introduction to Ayurveda before I move on? Where is it from?
It's thousands of years ago in northeastern India, in the Indus Valley. And oddly enough, it is not present there anymore. In India, I think it's mainly practiced now in South India. And in India, it has, in recent years, been medicine of the poor, people who don't have access to Western medicine. And I think it's looked down upon by Western educated physicians in India and more educated population. It has a great, one of the main emphases in Ayurvedic medicine is on detoxification. That disease is as seen as being often the result of accumulation of toxins in the body, especially in the GI tract. So there are many methods used in Ayurvedic medicine for purifying the body, for removing toxins, things including sweating and purging and fasting. So those kinds of practices are very prominent in Ayurvedic medicine. Also, Ayurvedic medicine has a huge botanical repertory, actually even greater than that of Chinese medicine, because India is a tropical country and has more species of plants. And I think those medicinal plants from India are much less well known in the West than are many Chinese herbs. But I think, some of them have proved themselves to be quite valuable. Maybe just briefly mention some practices that I think make it are not so easily integrated. One of the detoxification practices used in Ayurvedic medicine is bleeding. And in India, this is often done by the application of leeches. So that's not going to really fly in the West. Another is vomiting, and there are methods of inducing vomiting. Well, I think a lot of Western patients aren't going to go for that. Another area that's been of concern is that some of the Ayurvedic medicines include minerals, and some of the minerals are toxic, like mercury. And Ayurvedic say that they have methods of preparing these that render them non-toxic. But when Western doctors, see mercury being included in products, makes them very nervous.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Andy, for that. I have so many more questions about the practices, and some that I know are just not approachable for the Western temperament and the Western style. But Amita, could you talk about the concept of balance? Because let's bring it into a little bit more practical element for our listeners so they can go, well, I don't want to throw up and I don't want leeches, but it's actually quite an astoundingly balanced art of living. It's a beautifully balanced art of living. Could you talk about the balance of body, mind, spirit through in the Ayurvedic lens?
For sure. And, I actually am just going to piggyback off of what Dr. Weil was saying, that, once upon a time in India, this was just medicine. It was not specified as being anything other than. And so this idea of balance or lifestyle medicine is already inherently integrated into Indian culture and around Southeast Asia. And these concepts of balance really come from the concept of understanding yourself in terms of who you are as an individual, but also understanding yourself in terms of where you live, your genetic predisposition, any specific disorders you might have. This is another reason that Ayurveda has not taken over in the West so much, because it cannot be quantified in that same way that we can look at a disease, a disorder, and say, obviously, this is the treatment protocol, because there are too many variables along the way that create quote unquote balance. Every single person has a different kind of balance for themselves. And another, I just want to go circle back and say one of the other reasons that Ayurveda has not taken off in the West is we don't have a national licensure either. And it's very hard, again, to quantify how do you really test someone? How do you measure and create a marker on an individual knowing exactly how to address a particular disease or disorder when we are addressing it from such a variable perspective? And so one of the things I like to talk about is something in balance, and in Ayurveda is something that we don't even really have to go into the depths of Ayurveda to understand. And that is, what would happen if we just lived in harmony with our environment? This is true lifestyle medicine according to Ayurveda. Eat locally. Eat according to what you get back in touch with your own body. I mean, in Ayurveda, we talk about this in terms of the doshas and knowing what our genetic predisposition is and how our tendencies are. But, there are other ways that without the specific language of Ayurveda, we can get back in touch with our bodies and really start to understand what works for us, what doesn't work for us. Simple things like, when I eat this food, it doesn't make me feel very good. Am I sleeping and waking with the circadian rhythms? Do I feel at peace when I'm working day to day? And then all these techniques of meditation and yoga, breathing exercises, pranayam, and eating according to your constitution, then they start to play a role and a factor into what we want to do in order to create balance. And so sometimes I like to talk about it not in terms of Ayurveda, because again, for those who don't want to do leaching and emesis and doing all the extreme version of what we would do for detoxification and balance, that feels too far out there. There are other beautiful ways that we can bring it back to create that balance just by living healthy here in the now. So I know it's a kind of a general answer to your question, but just to bring it back home, instead of creating complication around it.
I have a question for Amita.
Mhm.
When I've gone to Ayurvedic practitioners, the first thing they want to know is diagnose my type, my constitutional type. You refer to the doshas,
Mhm.
Vata, Kapha, Pitta. And and that's based on appearance, on, questions that they may ask you. And then uh, the dietary recommendations, herbal recommendations, a lot of things are according to that classification. Now, that was developed in the Indian population. Do you feel that applies to other populations? Can you do that with Western patients? And sometimes it seems to me the recommendations are very rigid. That if you're this type, you shouldn't eat spinach. And does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love this. I'm always I love talking about breaking the rules without breaking the principles.
Good.
Because not everything applies in every situation. So there's two things to consider here. Number one is, yeah, we all really do have some particular tendencies that we have going on in the body, but many Ayurvedic doctors, believe it or not, will not tell you what your constitution is because they are there to help to create balance. So wherever the imbalance is, the words are prakriti and vikriti. So they're more focused on the vikriti because that's what the patient is there for. How can I help you get back to where you once were? And by doing that, the really important aspect of that is, yeah, it's good to know what your tendencies are so we know what we're going back to. But even that has to be made adjusted. So a really great example is if you are living in Southeast Asia, there are very specific foods that are not available there on a regular basis that would be available here. So oftentimes I recommend to my patients here in Arizona or the southern part of the United States, eat avocados. Avocados are not naturally grown in India. So this is a food, for example, that is it good? Is it bad? So what we really want to do is follow the concepts, follow the principles, follow the understanding of what do these foods do. And this is where this is where the science comes in. And I'm so grateful we're starting to look at a little bit more of the studies and the evidence-based research around particular botanicals and foods to find out what kind of effects do they actually have on the body so that we can explain it in terms of the actual disorder. So interestingly, my patients love to know what their constitution is, and I will sit and describe it, but I don't specifically say, this is who you are and this is the box that you fit in. Because as human beings, we get to explore all aspects of ourselves at any given time. And fun fact,
Mhm.
physiologically, we do have our vata, pitta, kapha predominance. Obviously, we came into the world with disposition, but mentally, we get to change that anytime we want to, anytime. So if someone says, "Oh, mentally you're vata," you can change that. We have life experiences. We grow spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Let's not fix ourselves.
Oh,
And I don't love rigid.
good. I like.
Yeah. So thanks for
Mm.
asking.
One of the things I think about as an integrative psychologist is we're always playing with our bodies, minds, emotions, thoughts. We're a laboratory to discover ourselves, to experiment with ourselves. One of the things I'm listening to both of you and thinking about is how do you help people develop enough self-awareness to start really tuning in to the bodies and how different foods and different practices actually change them or impact them? Because I'm just finding a lot of my patients really struggle even identifying what's going on in their body or their minds or their emotional systems.
Well,
And either one, you'd be
okay,
happy.
the word doctor comes from Latin. It means teacher. And I've always felt that the main job of a doctor is to teach people how to be well and how not to get sick in the first place. And that means teaching about how to live in accordance with natural principles. I mean, that's not a new idea. That's what Hippocrates taught in the 5th century BC. He said, that you want to revere the healing power of nature. And he was really the father of lifestyle medicine and gave very specific advice about how to eat in accordance with the seasons, how to exercise, and so forth. So I think the first step is trying to help people develop more confidence in their body's own ability to heal. And learn the basic principles of right living. If you look just at nutrition, I think in our society, we are in a great mess. If you just go in a supermarket and look what most people have in their baskets, it's horrific. It's all the processed stuff and from the middle of the supermarket. I think that's doing us in. So I just just basically try to raise some awareness about the fundamental principles of healthy living is a wonderful thing to be able to do, whatever perspective you're coming from.
Yes, I'm just gonna agree with Dr. Weil. And in Ayurveda, one of the ways that we help individuals get back in touch with themselves is we follow the principles of dinacharya or daily routines. Think of it in terms of a control study, right, for ourselves. If we eat at the same time every day, go to bed at the same time, have a practice, then with that new normal, we get to see if anything is out of balance. And this is a beautiful way to teach and show individuals that they can actually learn about themselves by creating a routine or a lifestyle that suits who they are. And they can do it themselves. Like, again, like Dr. Weil said, we're here to help the patient heal themselves. True healers, we're not here to say, okay, this is how you do it and this is how it's done, and then you're going to be, perfect, in perfect health because of it. It's all about giving others the tools that they need to find their own balance.
Recently, there has been the development of a field called lifestyle medicine. It's a well organized group now. Lifestyle medicine is actually a component of integrative medicine, and we work with that group very much. But I think it's a wonderful trend. One of, I think, the best ways that you can inspire patients to make better choices is by modeling healthy living yourself. You have to eat well, you have to exercise well, you have to practice, some sort of stress reduction. And I think by modeling healthy living, you can help patients be more motivated to make those choices.
Yeah, I think the hope is that we as therapists or clinicians or doctors are actually embodying the principles that we're teaching so that it's almost a radiant field that's felt by the client. And they're like, how do I want to feel that way? It's a felt sense of well-being that a person who's really taking care of themselves and are consistent in their habits start to kind of radiate or emulate out, and others want to feel that too. But we're in our Western system, our Western medical system, prescribing not just meds, but diagnosing, prescribing, and it really takes the agency away from the client, from the patient of discovering and really nurturing themselves. How do you both work in the system that really does not support client-centered medicine, client-centered well-being?
Well, I never worked in the system, and now my main work is training health professionals, physicians, and other health professionals to practice integrative medicine. I feel very bad. After very intensive training, we graduate them and turn them out into a world where everything is stacked against them. So I think the whole healthcare system has to change. It works against the interests of both doctors and patients at the moment, and it's very dysfunctional. And I think it will collapse, and something new will come out of it. But that's a tough question. I mean, I think the system is broken.
Yeah, I will agree.
Mm.
I also have the luxury of not working in the system, and sometimes I feel bad too because patients who have the education or the awareness to know that they can step outside of the system and come to see someone like me, not insurance covered. So there's another level of privilege that, exists for that. And that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy working at the Integrative Center and teaching physicians because I do, we talk about change comes from within, right? Same concept in our system of healthcare. That change has to come from within the system. So teaching physicians on how to create small changes within their own practice for their patients is so important. I have a friend who's a cardiologist, and I recently asked him, he's not in integrative medicine, and I said, how often do you ask your patients if they are stressed?
Mm,
And he said, I admit it, I don't have time for that.
mm,
I don't have the ability. And I said, 50%, if not more, cases of heart disease or
mhm.
even high blood pressure, come from elevated stress and a person's lifestyle and way of being. And he said, it's not part of our treatment or questionnaire protocol.
Yeah.
And so I asked that, and a few months later, he sent me a message. You'll be really proud of me. I've been asking some of my patients when I can, whether or not they've been stressed. And my question was, so what are you doing about it? And there was no answer because the training is not there. And so really it
Mhm.
has to come from within.
I have a question for both of you. If I want to refer a patient to an Ayurvedic practitioner, what do I do? How do I go about that?
Michael,
Mm.
what's your response to that?
Well, I'm a psychologist. I'm an integrative psychologist, but I have a background in Ayurveda. But it's outside the scope of what I do as a psychologist. Lifestyle medicine is not. Lifestyle therapy is not. But I refer. I have a whole group of colleagues that I refer to for a variety of practices like Reiki, cranial sacral therapy, Ayurveda. And so I'm really listening to what the client is needing and where they need to balance in their life. I'm helping them kind of understand what it takes to be committed to themselves. Many lack the self love or care that's needed to move forward with these practices. But then I personally have a whole network of people that I would refer to.
But how do I find Ayurvedic practitioners?
Hmm. Yeah. So
Google?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh
Um,
no, I just said Google.
Oh, Google. Actually, Dr. Weil, there are organizations in the country. So one of the largest ones is called, for the United States, is called NAMA, the National Ayurveda Medical
Mhm.
Association. So that is a really, really great resource to go and find someone who is certified. But again, it's not a licensure. So there are so many people who don't belong to that particular organization. So I always say that do your due diligence just the way you would find your primary care doctor. Do they resonate with you? Is it somebody that you think that you can send to for your patients? But the big question I always ask every single Ayurvedic doc, like say suppose I'm trying to find somebody in Chicago, I ask the questions: What's your level of training? So have you done your full level in India? It's called BAMS. Do you have a master's degree? Do you have an undergraduate degree? How many years have you been in practice? Some of my greatest Ayurvedic teachers don't have a quote unquote degree. They learned from the oral tradition. They've been practicing generation after generation, and they literally sit outside their home and have a line of people who come and talk to them about their problems. And so it doesn't fall into that specific jurisdiction. So if you are looking for someone, I even suggest uh, setting up a consultation or a schedule with them to say, what do you actually practice? What's your scope of practice? Do you do just prevention, maintenance of health, treatment of disease? Do you do panchakarma? Are these aspects within your privy? And if they are, these are the patients that I want to send to you. And I know it's a lot of extra work to go ahead and find somebody, but there are databases out there that you can find them.
You mentioned panchakarma. That's probably the Ayurvedic practice that has made greatest inroads in the US. There are a number of spas that offer this. This is the very famous detoxification regime. Would you say something about what panchakarma is?
Sure. So pancha means five and karma means action. So there are five ways that we can remove or detoxify the body. So anything, removal of anything that doesn't belong there or it can create a pathogen. So the five ways are through purgation, which is like taking something in like a laxative. through the nasal passages. We call that nasya. So removing anything from the eustachian tubes and into the ENT, all of the head, neck area of what's going on in the body, any disorder that might be around that. Then there's emesis, which is medical vomiting, which you mentioned earlier, and diseases and disorders of the epigastric region or even the lungs. There are enemas, which is, we're familiar with that. It's called basti. And last is bloodletting. So those are the 5 ways that we remove toxins. So a lot of these spas around the country, and not just in this country, but elsewhere, they indicate that they offer panchakarma. But what they're really offering is purva karma, which is what you do before the actual removal. So if you just went in and just did an enema or purgation or what have you, the body doesn't really know how to reset itself in a new way. It'll just go back to its inherent way of doing things. A quick cleanse or a purge isn't going to solve anything. So we have to do these precursor treatment protocols called purva karma that help to literally what we would call loosen what's going on in the body. And we usually do it through oil therapies, which are very beautiful and luxurious. So oil treatment on the body, warm oil across the forehead, even doing steams, things like that. Even an oil enema is considered to be purvakarma because it feels good and it feels very nourishing. So in panchakarma, we have one day where we really help to prepare the body for the elimination, and then we actually do that panchakarma the next day. Sometimes we do more than one, depending upon how we want to detoxify the body, what the patient's treatment protocol is, what their disease is. And then the next day we go back in and do those purva karmas again in order to help to bring that level of homeostasis back into the body again. So we don't completely revert back to going into this mode of feeling like fight or flight, because the body does that as well when we remove anything. And so this is generally done either by 7, 14, or 21 days. And in this way, we're able to work on more deep-seated pathologies rather than just something that may be happening on the surface where we can address it with lifestyle medicine or diet.
So, I mean, I experienced some of this some years ago at an Ayurvedic spa in Mysore, India, that you're probably familiar with. And let me just comment on 2 of the things. One were the oil massages, which were amazing. But I don't think you could practically do that in the US because I had 6 people working on me at the same time with a great deal of oil. I mean, it was incredible. But I think economically that is not feasible, in this country. The other practice that I found strange and went against all of my allopathic training was, I think it was a day of fasting that began with drinking a full glass of ghee, of clarified butter. So I found that very hard to do. Would you comment on that?
For sure, yeah. That ghee treatment protocol, I actually do it for my patients. In it's we That's the virachana, that's the purgation. It's the preparation for it. So the way that it's explained in Ayurveda, and I'm doing sort of a rough translation into English, so please forgive me if there's any discrepancy, but essentially ghee is a pure triglyceride. And so what happens is that when we take it it has to be on an empty stomach so it doesn't bind with the other food that we're eating. But when you take it on an empty stomach, it goes into the body and binds with impure triglycerides in the cells. So there is an actual mechanism for that to happen. And once that occurs, everything comes back to the gut through the bloodstream. And then at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're doing a purge. And so we're removing that. And that's the purpose behind doing that ghee on an empty stomach. And in fact, when you're doing panchakarma, you can do it in a large quantity, like a full glass of it. But when we do it at home or it's done in a more clinical setting, we increase the amount of ghee taken each day incrementally. So it's done over a number of days instead of that one day. When you're inpatient, we can do that. Outpatient, it's better to do it a little bit more gracefully. But yeah, it's a great experience. Actually, we like to measure CRP. This is my combination Western medicine. We like to measure CRP before and after to see if inflammatory markers have decreased. And we do clinical trials around that because essentially at the end of the day, these panchakarmas are they're not just something that we do to feel good. It's anecdotal, but also, we want to be able to see the efficacy of doing it for other reasons, like, for pre and post surgery, for those who have other inflammatory disorders that need a little of that, deep-seated adjustment in order for us to then carry on with other treatment protocols. So I'm really always excited about seeing those results.
After just 4 years, I've only studied Ayurveda for 4 years, and that was quite a long time ago. I found it very hard to practice the traditional way and integrate it into my own lifestyle. But what I did was take the principles like you talked about in the beginning and apply those in my daily life. So when I eat my meals, when I exercise, when I sleep, these things are kind of built into my lifestyle now, and they're the foundation for really what I feel is a healthy kind of lifestyle. So I'm wondering from both of you, we want our audience to maybe connect a little bit to what's more practical in Ayurveda, what they can maybe take home with them today, thinking about, well, these things I'm probably never going to do, but what can they do? What can they do to get in touch with themselves in a new lifestyle that promotes well-being of mind, body, and spirit?
Well, Amita mentioned that, paying attention to having regular habits, regular hours of sleep, eating at regular times. I think that's very important. Trying to notice what foods agree with you and what foods don't, and then adjusting your diet appropriately. I think Ayurveda places a great deal of emphasis on, mental well-being and spiritual well-being. So that's an area that many people don't pay any attention to. Amita, what would you add to that?
Yes, agreed. There is this concept, we talk about this a lot, where sometimes patients will come in and say, okay, I have a problem, but how do I address it? And because Ayurveda looks at everything from mind, body, spirit perspective, I think one of the things that I would recommend or take away is also following what Dr. Weil said is, when you start with the body, start with the routines and the rhythms to understand where you are physiologically. And then there's the mental aspect. And that actually can also be integrated in. We have so many beautiful practices in the world. There's breathing techniques, there's meditation, there's mindfulness. These are all, we have these words for them, but they all come from these premises of integrating mind, body, and spirit. And then, the last thing that I always like to talk about is just that bringing of that self-awareness of who am I in this world? And this is always a big question. Whenever I have somebody come in for anything, I say, hey, I'm going to ask you the big questions. I'm going to ask you, what do you think happens to us in life? Why are we here? What are we doing? Because sometimes those fundamental questions really help to determine how we can be healthier on a day-to-day basis. And so asking ourselves, not being afraid, or finding somebody, mental health, having somebody who can guide us through that process too. I love where we are in the world today. Mental health is no longer taking a back seat. It's on the forefront, and we have options. And this is Ayurveda. This is so beautiful. We are celebrating where we are today. And I also do recommend local eating. I'm going to actually just go right back to the body. I'm a big fan of local eating. I remember my Ayurvedic doctor when I was training, after I had finished training, I moved to Colorado in the mountains, and I had called my Ayurvedic doctor and said, this place, everybody eats a lot of meat here. And he said, you live in the mountains of Colorado in the winter. You should not be foraging for mung beans and rice right now. So finding what works for you in the environment that you live in, that would be my go-to answer. For anyone really wanting to know where to start, that's something that's attainable. Go to the farmer's market. Ask them. I drill the farmers at the farmers market. Did you really grow that here in Tucson in the middle of winter? Did you use a cold frame for that? Did you bring that in from somewhere else? I always ask these questions because I want to know if am I living in accordance and in harmony with the environment around me. And I would recommend that those who, if you don't feel like you're comfortable, even just go and explore and see what's in your environment.
At the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the Ayurveda's emphasis on detoxification. I meet many, many people who are very concerned about detoxifying themselves, and they go for all these products that are sold and so forth. The first rule of detoxification is to stop putting toxins in. So I think it's very important for people to be aware of what out there can be harmful. That includes all of the environmental things, products that you have around the home. And I'm also concerned about toxicity on the non-physical level. You know, one of the pieces of advice that I often give people is not to listen to news on television or to take news fasts. You know, if you tend to be depressed, don't spend time around depressed people. You know, those are simple kinds of lifestyle instructions that can be very helpful.
I think what Dr. Weil and what I'm hearing both of us say is, we could really be talking about any form of medicine at all, but the message remains the same, no matter what. And that is, finding that place where we're not being exposed to things that may be harmful. Avoid all causative factors first. That's our first, treatment protocol. And then also to live in harmony with your environment.
Yeah, I'm really hearing an emphasis. As a psychologist, I'm thinking, how can I help patients apply this in their daily life? And I'm thinking of all the mechanisms of defense, or maybe conditions that make it hard for them to choose healthy habits, make it hard to choose something non-toxic for some, because that's a lot of folks come to me wanting to change their behaviors, but it's not as simple as just changing their shopping list. It actually has underlying mechanisms of I'm worthy of being healthy, or I deserve to be healthy, or that could be an example. When people come to stop smoking, it's not simply what else do you want to add? It's where did you begin it? Where did you begin smoking? Why did you begin it? How does it fulfill you? Because an apple's just not going to cut it when that teenager in you's like, F this, I need something, but how can we get someone to listen to their bodies clearly so they go, wow, that cigarette does not feel good in me anymore. Something is happening where I don't want this in my system anymore. So that's where I love the integrative approach, where we're all coming in through different perspectives, helping somebody learn to listen and make choices that are better for this incredible ecosystem we live in. So do you have any examples? I would love one of you or both of you to let our listeners know, let the audience know, here's what it might look like. You come in with a chronic health issue, and here's how we're going to use Ayurveda to address some of that, and what it might look like in your daily life, if you have a chronic health issue, to apply some of these principles and practices.
I think I can start kind of in a general capacity. It's so hard to be specific, right? Without, again, when we talk about balance, it depends on the individual and who they are and what they're doing. One of the most common things that I do work on is inflammation throughout the body, which is we talk a lot about inflammation in Ayurveda and also in other forms of medicine. And in order to understand inflammation, we need to first understand what is an inflammatory response that the body is having and where does that come from. And in Ayurveda, we address it, from diet and lifestyle, and also, again, stress or what it is that's happening to us or what we're experiencing or how we're feeling. So, some simple things, like from an Ayurvedic medicine perspective, inflammation or that heat tends to be more of a pitta disorder. So we would recommend an anti-inflammatory diet. We would talk about the concepts behind them. Why do these foods increase or decrease inflammation in the body? We also will ask that my questionnaire is 9 pages long so that I can know, was there some trauma that just happened in your life? Have you experienced death recently? Is this really even the right time for you to come in and talk to me about this? Like I give an example. I lost my husband about 12 years ago. He died suddenly in a car accident. At that time was not the time for me to go see an Ayurvedic doctor and say, how can I adjust my lifestyle right now? At that time, that is the time to grieve. That is the time to be with yourself and be nurtured and held. And if ice cream sandwiches feel good, you eat ice cream sandwiches. And these are the concepts that we have to really work with our patients on. And even talking to them, like Dr. Weil mentioned, getting to know a person's lifestyle. Do you watch a lot of news? What kind of books do you read? What kind of music do you listen to? What fears do you have? What are your dreams like? These consultations that we do in Ayurveda are not a quick fix, and they really do a deep dive investigation. You get to know you live your patient's life with them, and so that you can start to understand where that starting point is. Diet's an easy one to talk about. However, if we are talking to individuals who have an eating disorder or something that creates trauma around that, then we do not start there. Ayurveda has a beautiful definition of health where we begin with the doshas and we end with that connection to ourselves. So we talk about the balanced doshas, balanced digestion, balanced tissues and organs, proper release of impurities, satiation of the all of the senses, and then calmness or joy of the mind and a connection to yourself. And whether we start with the doshas or whether we start to the connection to ourselves is all going to be dependent upon the person coming in and what their needs might be at that time. So, inflammation, as I said, is one of the most common things because we are all stressed. We live in a very stressful society, whether we want to or not. We just, again, like Dr. Weil said, you turn on the TV or you go outside and engage with humanity. There can always be something that's going on. So, how do we find our inner peace in that? And these are the steps by indicating and showcasing what is happening, where our inflammatory responses are, whether it's emotional, mental, or physiological. We begin there to indicate and show what kinds of treatment protocols we can make and how we can actually measure to see whether or not we've been effective.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's really an exploratory science. It's not a prescriptive one, and each person is so unique. Ayurveda really honors the person and where they've come from, their body, their mind, their even that you said existential questions play a role. So I love how in Ayurveda the person is center to their own healing. And so, Andy, I have a question for you. We're talking somewhat about lifestyle here, and you're on the forefront for many years of teaching about lifestyle, of healthy thinking, healthy eating. What are some absolutely core values you teach people or teach your clinicians to teach people about lifestyle? Because I would love our audience to have a sense leaving today of like, what are a few things they can bring home with them to sit as core values?
Sure. First of all, I think I really try to teach both health professionals and patients about the body's potential for healing. Most people have very little confidence in their body's ability to take care of itself. And I think that's where you should start. And the basic principles of healthy living are not complicated. You know, it is learning the basics of nutrition. And I think the most important advice is to avoid refined, processed, and manufactured food. It's that simple. You know, try to eliminate that and eat foods as close to the way nature produces them as possible. That's not complicated. If we were going to, you know, we're in such a mess in this country with nutrition. If there was one place I would start, it's to try to get people to stop drinking sweetened liquids. And it's not just soda. It's, you know, it's fruit juice, it's energy drinks, it's putting sugar in coffee and tea, it's all that. So that's first step. Secondly, I think it is very important to be physically active throughout life. That does not mean you have to work out with a personal trainer or go to a gym. You know, walking is a perfectly good form of physical activity that will last you throughout your life. I think it is very important to get adequate rest and sleep of good quality. I think it is very important to learn and practice some techniques of neutralizing the harmful effects of stress. My personal favorites are, breathing techniques because they're so simple and free and don't require, any devices. I think you could go through a list of things like this that are not complicated. And I'd like to see this taught in schools from kindergarten on up, these basic principles of healthy living. One piece of practical advice that I give patients is that if you want to develop better lifestyle habits, spend more time in the company of people who have them. If you want to eat better, spend more time with people who eat well. If you want to be more physically active, spend more time in the company of people who are physically active. So, simple stuff.
So I often say the truth is very simple. It rings like a bell, but it's not easy.
Yes,
So
right.
what you're teaching is actually very simple and very true. Our bodies want what's natural and don't want what's toxic or overwhelming to the system. But why is it so difficult? Why do so many of us struggle?
There's a lot of pressures on people to make unhealthy choices, especially in the areas of food, for example. I think, we as a society don't do a very good job at promoting health and preventing disease. There's not financial incentive to do that. I think we have to really change how we do that. So it's not just a matter of explain, and also you have to be able to explain this to people in ways that they can connect with their own experience. Here's an example. I think most young people don't know that all of the bone you have and all of the muscle you have is laid down early in life, through the teenage years up until your late 20s. That's it. After that, all you can do is slow down loss. You can't add new tissue. So that means that early in life, it is very important to do everything you can to make sure you're building up adequate bone and muscle mass. And that means that has very significant consequences in terms of what you put in your body, how you eat, what kinds of physical activity you get, and so forth. But I think if people understood that, that would help them not indulge in unhealthy habits.
This is good.
Right.
And it's important. It's important to me as a co-host of these summits to really make the truth simple but approachable and practical, and because that's what people want in the end. They need help going, hey, I know I want to feel healthy. I know something's off, but I'm not quite sure what's in my way. And I like simple experiments. So when my patients come and they're going, I don't have a lot of energy, I'm lethargic, and we check out what they do in their day and what they're doing before bed. And we look at their practice of living for the day. And if they're scrolling for an hour or 2 hours, I say, do yourself a favor, monitor how you feel while you're scrolling and then after, and then go sit by a river for an hour of your life, just 1 hour between now and when I see you, and then monitor how you feel next to the river and also journal that experience. And they come back and it's really obvious. There's no question left anymore.
I have a very specific takeaway that I can leave individuals with. It's something that I live my life by, and I know that Dr. Weil does as well, or it's a practice that we all have, and that is I encourage individuals, do not hit the ground running in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Have time for yourself. And we always say that the day begins at night. So the night before is when we really have to start thinking about what is my day going to be like. And if we don't take that time in the morning to just be with ourselves, and to experience what it is to even just be in this human body. We have so many beautiful concepts, like gratitude is something that a lot of individuals love to talk about and teach. We don't even have time for gratitude if we hit the ground running and we're at work 20 minutes after we get out of bed. That doesn't give us the room to even decide, how do we want to function in the world today? Who do we want to be as people and as individuals? We get to have that choice for ourselves. This is actually even delves into the concept of epigenetics, which is basically Ayurveda. I always say, oh, that's another word for Ayurveda, where we get to study how it is that the choices that we make can inherently change our gene expression. And so we get to choose how it is that we would like to live out our lifespan. Like Dr. Weil said, that everything is built at an earlier age. Now, what are we going to do with it as we get a little bit older? And we can start that process at 15, 20, 40, 60, 80. It's never too late to really take a look at ourselves and say, who do I want to be and how do I want to walk through the world?
Hmm. I like that so much. I actually suggest to most people every morning, what's your intention for the day, or what's your aspiration for yourself? How do you want to live today? It's a beautiful way of slowing down. Is so healthy, and most of us don't do it. So as we wrap up, I'm just wondering, this summit's about living the best year of your life. Let's say this is the year we get. What heartfelt message can each of you give to our viewers before we end today?
I would say don't try to make global change. You do small steps. Pick one thing that you can work on, whether that's going to be eliminating processed food or starting to walk every day. Pick something that's practical that you can do and then build from there.
And
Wonderful. Thank you.
I would just add to that, we also, when we want to go towards something, whether it's healthy living or being free of disease or however we see our lives, we have to really embody that and put ourselves in that place first, emotionally and mentally, and then we can make our way there. So if we are always thinking about disease, I don't want to get sick, we are still heading towards sickness. To create that mental mindset so that we can walk toward health and not away from it.
Mm.
Mm.
And let me just say that in closing, that our center at the University of Arizona is very committed to introducing the people we train to the basic principles of Ayurvedic medicine. And we are very fortunate to have Amita as a faculty member in that. And, I think we are one of the first medical schools that's doing this. And I hope that there'll be more doctors out there who certainly are aware of what Ayurvedic medicine is and how it might be useful to them and their patients.
Well, thank you both so much for your dedication and care to our health and well-being. I feel safe. I feel safer knowing you both are out there doing your work. And I hope everyone listening might explore Ayurveda more and look you both up. So thank you both for coming and sharing some time with me and on the summit. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Michael. Appreciate it.